From the Times Center in New York City, City University Television, in association with the New York Times, presents a TimesTalks series with editors and writers of the New York Times. Today's presentation, a conversation with Betty White, Times interviewer Frank Bruni.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Olson Day of the New York Times, and I am delighted to welcome you to this exciting TimesTalks at the Times Center. Tonight, we are honored to have on our stage one of today's most popular and respected actresses. And actually, she's one of today's most popular and respected people. Her award-winning career in television and film has been so impressive. She has spanned 7 decades with such iconic roles as The Mary Tyler Moore Show and The Golden Girls. She's been awarded TV's top honor, the Emmy, and it hasn't been just once or twice or 3 times, but a total of 7 times. And recently, too. She's also widely recognized for her lifelong work for animal welfare. Her new memoir, called If You Ask Me, and of course you won't, will be signed by her downstairs after the discussion. Tonight's moderator, who interviewed her at the Los Angeles Zoo last month for the Times, called the new book a breezy patchwork of musings on aging, acting, poker, she plays a monthly game, and pet ownership. She has a golden retriever named Pontiac, or Ponty for short. You'll hear much more about her and her book from our moderator. He too has had a remarkable career. 8 years ago, after reporting from the White House, covering the 2000 presidential election, and serving as the paper's Rome bureau chief, he took on the hefty job of restaurant critic. Along the way, he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and a winner of the prestigious George Polk Award for Reporting. His column and blog, called The Tipsy Diaries, is a must-read for cocktail connoisseurs. He's also recently been writing for the Sunday magazine, but this month he takes on a new role as our national correspondent at large. He's also the author of 2 books, the bestseller Ambling into History and the memoir Born Round. Please join me in welcoming Frank Bruni and our very special guest, Betty White.
My goodness, they know how to spoil a gal.
I think they're excited to see you.
Well, I'm excited to see them. How about that?
Now, you, if I understand it correctly, and you talk about this in the book, you resisted the idea of hosting Saturday Night Live for many years, right?
Oh, I turned it down 3 times earlier in my career. It's such a New York-oriented show, and I'm such an obvious Californian that I was afraid I'd feel like a fish out of water, you know, and I wouldn't fit in, and I was scared is what I was, frankly. But when Lauren invited me again this last time, and they had that silly Facebook thing, which I didn't understand. I didn't even know what Facebook was. And so I said no again, and my agent said, you have to do it. So I went back, and I'm glad I did, because it was scary, but it was a great experience, and I did have a good time.
Now, what was so scary about it?
Oh, Saturday Night Live, you're with all those New York people, and you start out with 40, 45 sketches. I think the most scary thing were the cue cards, because I never use them. I memorize or I ad lib, but I hate that look where somebody's looking into the camera and then they look over at the cue card and their eyes are doing this all the time. But you can't memorize. As I say, you have 40, 45 sketches and they keep changing. Well, they have a cue card, a wonderful cue card man. he said, now when you're talking to Tina Fey, for example, don't look at Tina. Look over her head. I'll be way back there with just keep your eye on the cue cards. Tina Fey is standing here and you don't look at her. How do you do that? But it worked. It really helped because I didn't have to I just stayed with that, but it was tough to do when she's standing right here.
You were originally supposed to just do what, a couple of episodes of Hot in Cleveland?
Oh, one. I did the pilot as a guest shot, a one shot. I'd been doing guest shots on various shows. And I said I would do it fine with the proviso I would not be involved if it should get picked up for series. Well, you know how many pilots you do that don't get picked up for series. But it wasn't that I didn't love the girls and love the show, but there was just no room in my schedule for another series, no way. Well, sometimes you'll do a pilot in February and then it'll get maybe you'll know whether it won or lost by May. Well, they got picked up in 3 weeks. And the company came to me and said, would I do some more? And I said, well, that was the proviso that I would not. And I have such a strong backbone. They picked us up for 10. And would I do a couple more? I wound up doing all 10. And then they picked us up for 24 more, and I wound up doing all 24. They can't get rid of me. But it's such a happy show to do, and I adore the girls. Valerie Bertinelli and Jane Leaves and Wendy Malick are just a joy to work with. Aren't they marvelous? The only problem is we're all pigeons for breakups, and we'll be doing fine, and then we'll look at each other, and Valerie's eyes start to dance, or Jane Leaves' mouth starts to quiver on the corner, and we know, and we're gone. We're laughing so hard we have to stop and go back and start over again.
I think I saw something on the internet recently, and I think it had to do with a Facebook handle or a dating where you were trying to do a scene 5 or 6 times and you couldn't get through it because you kept on breaking up.
Oh, and don't ask, they're usually such silly things. People think, oh, they have a dirty connotation, they have some kind of a dirty joke in there that they're laughing at. You never know what's going to trigger you. But when we all love each other so much, we adore each other, and so when one starts to go, pretty soon somebody else catches on, and we're helpless. It's not what you might call the most professional approach to comedy.
How many of you watch Hot in Cleveland?
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
I have an insider question, which is, you are supposedly the property caretaker. I can't figure out from what I've watched what the heck you do around that property to earn your keep.
I haven't a clue. I live next door. When the girls rented the house, when they came to Cleveland and rented the house, I had been taking care of the house as a house sitter or keeper or whatever for 50 years. So they came and they inherited me along with renting the house. And I'm always in there. I come in the back door like I live there. I'm in the kitchen when they're they can't get rid of me. And I have no idea what my function is.
I'm glad to know it's not just me. Now, Betty is here because she just has come out this week with this book.
Just yesterday.
Just yesterday. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in the book, but my eyes were drawn, maybe because of my dirty mind, to something on the cover. And here we have, among the various blurbs, we have a blurb from Robert Pattinson, who some of you may know from his vampire work, that says, Betty White is one of the sexiest women in America. Betty, I want to know, other than write a nice letter to him asking for the quote, what did you do to get it?
Well, I never could quite figure out which one of us was the vampire, but I don't know where that came from. I've never met the gentleman, but I appreciated his voice of confidence a lot. And so bless his heart, but he must dig distortion. I'm going to be 90 next January, so I did. Yeah. So he, perhaps he should see a therapist. Do you think?
So how does someone who is not dim or terminally naive, as you said it, how do you play someone like Rose? What would you do to enter Rose's head?
Well, Rose thought life was like a musical comedy. It was going to have a happy ending. And she didn't. Jay Sandrich, who directed most of the Mary Tyler Moore shows, directed our pilot. And bless Jay's heart, he set the tone in my head for Rose. Not an ounce of sarcasm, never got a double meaning. She thought, at one point, she thought Don Amici was her father. And she just lived in a world of her own and had a life of her own in her head, and no sophistication whatever. So the other girls could say terrible things to her, but she didn't get it. So she just thought they were being nice and talking to her. That was good.
You were not originally fated to play Rose, right? Can you tell us about that?
They sent me the script as Blanche, to look at Blanche, and
why were they thinking of you for Blanche?
well, I had come off of Sue Ann Nivens off the Mary Tyler Moore show. Thank you. And they thought if I played another neighborhood nymphomaniac, that people would think I was playing the same character, because Sue Ann did get around, as you know, and Blanche did, as you know, get around. So they thought maybe if they switched us. And I didn't know quite who Rose was, but Susan Harris, who wrote the character, said, again, like Jay did, said it, her total naivete. But Rusie, my beloved Rue McClanahan, took Blanche and went out into a territory I would never have had the guts to do, and she made it her own, bless her heart.
Was she the golden girl to whom you were closest, Rue?
We were all close, and but our personalities were also different. B had a reserve, and B, I was crazy about B, and I admired her work so much, and I loved her. She was not that fond of me. She found me a pain in the neck sometimes because of my.
Why didn't she not?
Oh yeah, because my positive attitude. I'm happy all the time, and that made B mad sometimes, Sometimes if B wasn't happy, she'd be furious. I was happy, she'd be furious. So, but Rue and I, we'd play games on the set. We'd be in a scene, waiting, say, outside to make an entrance or something in a scene, and we'd start a game. You know how you play the alphabet game, categories, automobiles, A, B, C, D, or animals or something like that. So one of us would drop a clue to the other and then make our entrance, and we'd go in and we'd play the scene and all that. And as we made our exit, the other one would give the answer and the next question. So we'd be playing a game all through the show.
You write in the book about an interesting reservation hang-up Estelle Getty had about certain material and certain lines on the show. Can you tell us about that?
Estelle didn't like anything to do with death. Death frightened her very much. And I can't think of the number of scenes we had in casket showrooms and stuff. And that always, she didn't like that a bit. She just didn't want to ever talk about death. Strange.
When you...
No, I mean, it was almost a phobia.
All of them are gone.
All of them, and I can't believe I'm the only one left because I was the oldest. And I thought, that you think of it going that way, and it went the other way.
When you do a show as long as you did that, are you relieved when it's over, or is there a real sense of grief?
Oh, it's a sense of loss. Well, I'm speaking personally from my standpoint. Sometimes it's a relief for people. Oh, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. But it's the last Mary Tyler Moore show. We couldn't get through even the rehearsal on the last day. We couldn't get through it. We had to finally play the scene. And the next week, when the show was pulled together, Mary gave a dinner party at Chasen's, and we all went to see the show. And we had been so emotionally involved that we didn't really know what the show was about. And we realized it was a very funny show and all that. But when we got to the point where Ed Asner said, "I treasure you people," there was this big sob in the whole restaurant. We all, and I still can't watch. I've watched it over and over again. I can't watch. I get to that line and the tears start. Same thing with Golden Girls. To realize that this is the last one. We won't be coming back again. It's tough. It's really tough. You get sentimental. You get nostalgic, because we loved each other. And when you love people that much, knowing it's the end of something is sometimes a little tough to take.
Of the people you've worked with, whom do you keep in closest touch with? Who are the closest friends to this day?
Ruzi was, until recently. Mary and I have stayed friends. Mary lives in New York, I live in Los Angeles, but we talk on the phone maybe every few weeks just to catch up. And Ed Asner and I are very close. We adore each other. We haven't said a very nice thing to each other forever, but we adore each other. And every once in a while they do a reunion of the old Mary Tyler Moore group, and that's always fun because we see Gavin and we see everybody. It's hard to pick one person that close, but...
Now, Mary showed up recently somewhere interesting in terms of your work life, yes?
Yes, she did. The beginning of our third season, I think it was, or was it our second, on Hot in Cleveland.
Second.
Our second year. I lose track of time, and my arithmetic is not good. So we started, Elka went to jail, and then we ended the season on her mugshot going to jail. So we opened the next season, the second season, on her in jail, and she's sitting there as the show opens, and there's another couch with another prisoner on it, lying on the couch, napping, facing the wall. And when the dialogue starts, the prisoner rolls over, and it's Mary Tyler Moore. So it surprised everybody.
Now, when you first made an appearance on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, it was just supposed to be for a guest spot, right?
Oh, just a one shot.
Did you go thinking, I'm going to make this permanent?
Oh, not at all. Mary and I were dear friends. So one Saturday, they called me. The show taped on Friday night, I think. Or was it? Yeah, we showed on Saturday, taped on Friday. So one Saturday morning, I got a call from Alan Burns, and he said, "Would you do our show next week? We've got a character of a happy homemaker who's the sickening Betty White type, and we can't." No, that's what he said, and we can't find anybody sickening sweet enough, you know, that really you get. And he said, "So would you come in and do a one shot with us?" Well, I thought that was great fun, so I called Mary and I said, "Guess who's doing your show next week?" And she said, "Who?" I said, "Me." She said, "Oh, no, you're not. I have veto power." So we did. It was just a show for that night. But one of the big thrills was after the show that night, Alan Burns and Jim Brooks said, don't make too many plans. We've got an idea for another couple of shows." And the next morning, we taped on Friday night, filmed on Friday night. And the next morning, the doorbell rang, and Alan and I went to the door Saturday morning. And here's Mary and her husband, Grant Tinker, with the casserole in that first episode of Mary that was in the oven, and the oven was open, and Phyllis was there, Cloris Leachman was there, and the director said, "You can't play the whole scene with this open oven door. You know, how do you do that?" But we were all too angry to close it. So kidding, I was horsing around. Kidding, I just lifted my knee. I said, "There's one way." He said, "That's it, leave it in." Well, that Saturday morning, Mary brought that casserole full of flowers. She said, you're now a recurring member of the show." it was a lovely moment.
You, when I asked you when we met in LA what your favorite TV job ever was, I was expecting you maybe to say Sue Ann Nivens or Rose Nyland. You said something else. Do you remember what you answered?
No.
Your favorite?
No, not right now I can't. It's been a long day for
Well, we'll see if she's consistent. What was your favorite TV job?
Yeah, my favorite TV job was the Pet Set.
She's consistent, yes.
It's a show I created and hosted and wrote and cast, and I would have a friend come on the show with his or her pet, and I would interview them with the pet. Then I'd send the pet away, and whatever their favorite breed or something like that, I'd do a whole breed spot. Great Danes, for instance. I'd have Danes of various ages so you could see them as they develop, and all 5 colors of Danes, the Harlequins and the blacks and the blues and the fawns, and so I'd have a whole production number of that. Then I'd bring animals from the zoo, our zoo, and bring them in so that, and the crew was wonderful. They never moved a mic fast, they never made any noise. So I would have, at one point I had 5 full-grown male African lions on stage. Another time I had a water buffalo on stage. I was having the time of my life. No question about what my favorite show was.
When and how did you become so crazy about animals? Because you're really crazy about animals.
In the womb.
In the womb.
In the womb, my mother and dad were the same way. They've always been my joy, my fascination. I'm constantly fascinated by them. And I'm fortunate enough to work with the Los Angeles Zoo. I have for 48 years. So I get backstage and I know the keepers, and you learn so much.
Betty, when people talk about your many gifts as a comedian, they always talk about your timing. And someone who's worked with you said that they think your history in radio is part of how you honed your timing. What do you think your work in radio did for your career going forward?
I didn't do that much work in radio. I did a show, Hal Perry and Great Gildersleeve was my first job. And radio is wonderful. You don't have to put your eyelashes on, and you read your lines, and it really, it's stealing is what it is. You take money for that. But television was just starting. I mean, it was just beginning. And there was Al Jarvis was a disc jockey on radio, and he decided to start a television show. Well, Al never did anything halfway, so he started a 5-hour television show every 5 days a week. And we started no script, no nothing. We would just sit there and talk to each other. Maybe you and I could start something. And so we sat there and had a conversation for 5 hours, and we'd make up as we went along. We'd have guest stars come through. Well, the boss of the station, Don Feddersen, called us in one day. And we thought maybe, whoops, thank you very much, it's been swell. He said, we're going to do it 6 days a week, and we're going to add a half hour every day. So we wound up doing 5.5 hours every day, 6 days a week. Christmas, New Year's, there were no holidays. It was like going to television college. You really learned your trade, and it was great fun. Scary sometimes, but great fun.
You met your late husband, Alan Ludden. You met him when you went on Password as a guest, yes?
Third week it was on,
Yeah.
And he was the host, and I had watched him on GE College Bowl late at night. He had watched me on the Jack Parr show. So we knew of each other but didn't know each other, and he was charming. He was so nice. And Bob Stewart, who created Password, and he created so many of the wonderful Goodson Todman game shows, is still my best buddy, my poker buddy. And he said that when I left the show that day, Alan said, I'm going to marry that woman. Well, it took me a year. I wasted a whole year we could have been together, saying, no, I won't marry you. No, I won't move to New York. No, I'm a Californian. No, no. Well, he was a pretty good salesman. And Easter came along, and we would talk. I traveled back and forth, as did he, to work on both coasts, but we'd always talk to each other around 11 o'clock at night. So Easter came along, and he sent me this beautiful little fluffy white stuffed bunny with diamond and ruby earrings on his ears. And he said, please say yes on the card. So that night I didn't say hello when I answered the phone. I said yes, and it was a big step for me. So years after that, he would say, and it wasn't those gorgeous earrings that I bought, it was that damn stuffed bunny that you... He was a sweetheart.
You're here at 89 with a book, with a hit TV show, 7 Emmys. Was there ever a time, a lull, when you actually worried that your career was not where you wanted it to be, when you were actually worried about your career?
Frank, it's terrible to say. I am the luckiest old broad on 2 feet, truly. But I've always been working at something. I think it's because I don't get choosy. You know, if a job comes along, I love this business so much and I love doing it. So when a job would come along, I'd say, yes, well, you meet a lot of producers and a lot of people that way. So when one thing would peter out, something else over here would come up. So I've been very fortunate not to have to get that feeling, and don't think I ever take it for granted. I appreciate it, and I still appreciate it and taste it constantly.
What have you said no to in advance? What has been a level of sauciness too much for you?
Violence. I don't like violence at all. I'm paranoid about drugs. I don't think there's anything funny about drugs. I've seen too many of my friends get into hopeless trouble with drugs, and too many young people. So I won't play any of those games, so that I just automatically say thank you, but no thank you. But then some of the ones that maybe I should say no to, I go ahead and have a ball.
Was that the first thing you did for David Kelly?
Lake Placid was the first thing.
Oh, that preceded Ally McBeal?
Yeah, Lake Placid. And I apologize.
That many people have seen Lake Placid, wow.
Yeah. Well, they keep rerunning it, and I'll go through an airport concourse or something like that, and I use foul language, the language of a truck driver in the character did, and I fed my husband to a crocodile, and it was not my most upstanding role. And so I'll go through an airport or something, and a grandmother with a tiny little boy or girl will come along. Oh, I loved you in Lake Placid. And I always say I apologize for the language. And the grandmother invariably says, oh, that's fine. That's what I loved about it. So the world has turned.
And there was more after that, right?
The Ally McBeal was first, and then Lake Placid followed Ally McBeal. And then Boston Legal, I had a good time. Oh, I loved it. Again, Catherine Piper was, you saw her commit murder. She killed a guy with a frying pan and James Spader got her off. And she committed about 4 other crimes and James Spader got her off. I finally, at the Comedy Awards, I said if David E. Kelly wrote me any more roles, he could end my career completely. And then he wrote me murdering this guy in Boston Legal.
The William Shatner roast.
Yeah.
Did you script that out beforehand? Were you ad-libbing?
No, I thought David E. Kelly had written that because I was doing Boston Legal, and when I got asked to do the roast, and I read the material, sure it's risque, sure it's raunchy, but it's not. It's not, offensive to the point that it's going to do harm. So I thought, all right, let's do it as long as David wrote it. Well, when I got down to the roast, I discovered it was put on by Comedy Central, which is another whole different ballgame. But now I'm committed and I'm there to do it. So I read the material, but I kept my fingers crossed like mad. So Bill called me the next day He said, did you live through it? I said, yeah, did you? He said, just. He's a great guy.
Did you, how did the proposal come to you? How did you end up in that movie? Because that's been another big thing in recent years, yes?
They sent me this. You get a lot of scripts, and you read a lot of scripts, and there are not that many really good scripts. There are ones you accept and do, but that was one you fell in love with, and it was. And then when I heard that the casting of it was just beyond belief, and I wound up being lifelong friends with the cast and the director, Ann Fletcher. So I really enjoyed doing that, and I thought it was a good script. And I just did another one, Hallmark Hall of Fame, that was the same thing. It was a script. I didn't have any time to do it. My schedule was jammed, but I couldn't pass up the script. It was The Lost Valentine, and I just loved the script. I loved the story. And again, Jennifer Lee Hewitt has become such a dear friend. That's the wonderful part about this business, Frank. There's a personal side to it as well as a professional side, that you wind up with a whole new family, and you add a member every once in a while.
One of those members, you told me, does something very nice for you frequently, Jamie Lee Curtis. Occasionally something happens at your house.
Oh, well, Jamie Lee, I did a movie called You Again, and Jamie and I, again, fell in love and became great and dear friends. And every once in a while, I'll open the front door, and here on my front step is a bunch of garden, hand-picked yellow roses. She knows I love flowers. Yellow roses wrapped in sometimes newspaper, and I know exactly where it came from. Jamie Lee Curtis picks them out of her garden, drives by my house. We live a few blocks apart, and just drops them there, and she knows I'll find them sooner or later. It's a lovely, lovely touch. It makes you feel warm all over. She's a sweetheart. She really is.
Is there a part that got away, a part you really wanted to play that you did not get the chance to?
I don't think so. There were some I lusted after, but that didn't work out. I think the fact that I can honestly say now, there's not one that I still look back, oh, I wish I had, I wish I could have. Again, the luckiest person on the planet.
Now, what's ahead? You have a reality show that may come out in the fall. Can you tell us about that?
It's a show that was tremendously popular in Europe. It's a kind of a reality game show. It's called Off Their Rockers, and that's the name of it because it's older people getting the jump on young people. Instead of the joke being on the old person, as it usually is, the old people get to do, they set up things. It's a cousin of a show like Candid Camera, where the old people set up something on purpose, but the young people who overhear it or maybe see it happen don't know it's a setup. And so I think we're going to have fun with it. The pilot made me laugh, and so we're going to, and I'm executive producer. I'm trying to stay off, honestly, I'm trying to stay off the screen, give you a rest. But I may wind up doing lead-in and lead-outs, but that's all.
And that's, we can look for that in the fall?
Probably we'll start the meetings in July and then go for it for maybe fall. And then, of course, in September, Hot in Cleveland starts back again. So it's going to be a busy season.
How do you do it all? You're 89. I'm not like I say that like you don't know it. You know, are you really careful about what you eat? Are you careful about how much sleep you get, your exercise? How do you stay so vital?
I eat my favorite. I'm a health nut. My favorite food is hot dogs with French fries. And my exercise, I have a 2-story house and a very bad memory, so I'm up and down those stairs. What did I come up here for? What was I supposed to bring back? Oh, I left it upstairs. I have to go up again. It's, but I go back to the fact that I'm blessed with good health, and that if you can be that way when you're going to be 90 in January, you better appreciate it.
What do you find most difficult about aging?
Nothing. I know that sounds terrible, but you're treated so beautifully. People spoil you rotten. I'll be standing on the set and I turn around and somebody has brought me a chair whether I want one or not. So you have to sit down and thank you so much. You were perfectly happy. But I really don't. My mother had a wonderful approach to death. She always thought of it as, she said, we know, we have managed to find out almost anything that exists, but nobody knows. We think we do, and some believe they do. We don't know what happens at that moment when it's over. And she said it's the one secret that we don't know. So whenever we would lose somebody very close and very dear, she'd always say, well, now he knows the secret. And it took the curse off of it somehow. And now she knows the secret. So I have no fear or dread of death. I'm happy as a lark to stay around as long as That doesn't mean I'm saying, oh, I'm looking forward to death, or oh my God, death. But when it happens, it's the how, not the when. It's the how. You just hope it's as I hope I get out of people's way with as little trouble as possible.
Do you have your own theory about what the secret is? Do you have your own belief in what death is?
I'm fascinated by it, completely fascinated by it, but I don't have any assumptions, or I just I'll be interested to find out.
Did you, forgive the slightly macabre question, but did you go to the funerals of Rue and Estelle? And why not?
I don't go to funerals. I don't. I'm always depressed after funerals, of course, by the loss of the person you loved. But there's so many other things that happen at funerals, and people make such a big to-do, and especially if you're a celebrity, that's all about this, not about the person you're grieving. At least in my experience, it's been that way. So I have my own little personal service that sometimes goes on for weeks, but they understand.
Betty, in your book you write, animal lover that you are, a cougar you are not. So you're not enjoying your fame in all the ways you might?
Well, I haven't met him.
I can show you. Oh, Robert, yeah.
But I haven't met him, so maybe I've always liked older men. All my life, older men have been more attractive to me, except perhaps tonight.
See, you just can't help it, whether it's on screen or...
But it'll be, I didn't marry a man I was very much in love with, because he was 2 years younger than I. And at that point, I said, yes, but when you're 60, I'll be 62. And, I didn't want to be the older one of the group. Well, he's still one of my dear and close friends. He and his wife are my dear and close friends. And I'm pushing 90, and I'm 89, he's 87, or somewhere around there. So it doesn't make any sense, but at the time, it's absolute, that's the only way to fly.
You have made reference tonight to how happy you've always been. Could you share some of your secrets to happiness, because it can't just be luck?
I know it's so corny to say, but you got to think of the positive first before you think of the negative. So many people start with, I have friends who come in and say, you know what I hate? And they're opening for a conversation. And I think if you kind of, you don't want to get to the point where you look back at a moment and say, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was such a wonderful thing that happened. Taste it at the time and appreciate it then, and it just keeps you a lot happier than the alternative. Let's put it that way. Thank you. And I know people get B. Arthur used to get mad at me for being happy. She's, oh my God, it's a slick thing, and it's the. But I enjoy it. I just enjoy it.
Wondering if you have any advice on grieving and going on and performing.
You gotta let it out. You gotta do it. But each of us finds a different way of doing it, and the problem with the situation is that the only thing that helps really is time. And it's the one thing you can't package and give to somebody to comfort them. You just have to live through it. But you don't be afraid to every once in a while let it wash over you. And because sometimes memories that you didn't even realize you had wash through at a time like that. And then you get where you get a little stronger and a little more time goes by and but then the good stuff, the permanent stuff stays there, and that's a big comfort. Alan's been gone for over 25 years now, and every once in a while the silliest little nothings, you'll get a whiff of a flower that he planted in the backyard, and oh boom, all of a sudden there it is again. But after enough time goes by, it's sort of a comfort because he never goes away.
Could you share stories about Johnny Carson and then Lucille Ball, since you worked with both of them?
Well, Johnny and I grew up kind of together. Don Fedderson, the producer that I mentioned before, who extended our Al Jarvis show, he discovered Liberace and Johnny Carson and Betty White all at once, and he really put us on the air. I was doing this local show, and he put me on network, NBC Network, and Johnny was so young that, you know how a teenage boy's wrists are long and they haven't grown into their bones yet? Well, that's about what Johnny was at that point. And Liberace he made a star of Lee, who was a wonderful pianist that started, again, we all started at the same station. So, but Johnny, at that point, did a daytime show called Who Do You Trust? And I kept correcting him, saying, it's whom do you trust? But he wouldn't take the hint. But we were friends then and became very good friends, so we sort of followed each other. And then, of course, when he became Johnny Carson, he would call me and he'd say, Betty, I have an idea for a sketch. Do you think this would be funny, or do you think this would work? Well, the first woman allowed in the locker room at the ballpark, or the Adam and Eve 25 years after their marriage was breaking up, and all these various things. So we'd go out and I had this short leopard suit, or I was in the, Johnny was in his trunks in the locker room taking a shower when I was as the journalist. I said, you know what it amounts to, Johnny? Every time you want to take your clothes off, you call me. But it was fun.
And do you have anything you'd like to share about Lucille Ball?
Oh, Lucy. Lucy's mom and my mom were best friends. So Lucy and I loved each other dearly, and she tried so hard to teach me backgammon. She was a champion backgammon player. And she would invite me over to her house, and she'd have it all set up. And she said, now here's what you do. You throw the dice, and then, oh, yeah, here, with that, you move these. And then, yes, and then she'd take her turn, and then I'd throw the dice. And before I could even reach for the thing, she no, see, you do that. I said, Lucy, how am I going to learn backgammon if you're playing both sides of the game? But her mom, Dee Dee Ball, and my mom were great and good friends. They both they were not joiners, but they agreed to join the Motion Picture Mothers up at Motion Picture Home and go to meetings and raise money to support the Motion Picture Home. But they said they wouldn't do any work. Well, I think they were there about a week, and my mom was treasurer, and Dee Dee was something else. Of course, they went in and got to work immediately. And after my mom died and Dee Dee was gone, Lucy sent, on my mom's birthday, Lucy sent me violets every year. It was lovely.
In all your work with animals over the years, have you ever had a close call with one of the animals you worked with?
I've only been hurt by an animal one time, and believe me, I've been working with animals as close as I possibly can get away with all my life. I was driving. Alan was doing a show up in Michigan, summer stock show, and I went up to see him perform, and he was in rehearsal, so I took a drive out in that beautiful countryside, and I took myself a drive, and I saw these beautiful swans on the river. Mm-hmm. You're way ahead of me. So it was my own fault, it always is. So I stopped the car, and there was not no cars on the highway or anything. I was up there in this beautiful country, and I got out and I walked over so I could get a better look at them. And I heard this hissing. And there was a female swan on the nest with her cygnets, her chicks, and all of a sudden, out of left field came this male swan. And he came and flapping his wings, and he hit my leg with his wing. It was like being hit in Mickey Mantle hit your thigh with his baseball bat. He almost darn near broke my leg, and it was sore for weeks. And it was my own fault. He told me, don't come over here, stay away. But isn't it silly to say the only animal you've ever, rhinoceroses, bears, elephants, my beloved Gita. The only time you've been hurt is by a swan.
With all the award shows you've been to and all the awards you've won, do you have a favorite award show moment that you've been involved in?
I think the first time I got an Emmy for the Mary Tyler Moore Show when Ed Asner was up there with me, and it came as such a show. There wasn't a chance that I could win. You know, I knew that, and all of a sudden, here's this Golden Girl in my hands, and it was really exciting. Yes, and then the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Screen Actors Guild, where it's your peers giving you, you know, this wonderful vote of confidence. Sure, it's an ego trip. Sure, you know, I know all that, but you're lying if you say it doesn't thrill you to pieces.
And ask you if you were all aware while you were doing some of the scripts you were doing that you were doing very groundbreaking material.
I think we kind of were. I think we kind of knew that because, again, I go back to the writing. We had such deep respect for our writers who would take a subject that was not necessarily a subject that other shows would address at that point in time. But because we were all older, we were these older women, we could get away with it, wrong term. We could address the subject without being salacious about it, and because we were of that given age. Well, then the other shows began to come along where these young, gorgeous women would do the same kind of racy material, and it became a different set of rules. But I think we addressed AIDS, we addressed pill taking, we addressed things like that at that time were kind of groundbreaking, and I think we sort of realized it.
How come there was never a Golden Girls reunion special?
They tried several times. They wanted to do a movie, you know, a Golden Girls, where did they go from here and all that. Bea wouldn't do it, and she may have been right. She said, nope, no way. She said, just let's quit while we're ahead and no looking back. So we would have all loved it because it would have been another excuse to work together. But she had a good argument. Quit while you're ahead. Probably made sense.
I think that's a great last line. Betty White.